Hey guys, how are we doing today? Satano here with another video for you, and this time it is on Death of a Game Rumbleverse from Nerd Slayer Studios. We've done a video from him before. Very cool guy, knows his stuff. So when I saw that he did he did a video on Rumbleverse, I was very intrigued to see what he had to say about this game and why it didn't beat the 3 count when it got pinned last year. So, before we go any further, just so you guys know, I'm not some random guy who played 5 minutes of Rumbleverse and then dipped before giving his opinions on it. I'm a world record holder in that game. I have a 29 solo win streak and a 30 win streak. So that's 2 different world records, one being a completely singular session, no breaks, and the other one being with breaks in between. All of it recorded. You can have a look at those videos there, and as you can see as well, I've got quite a few Rumbleverse videos that popped off around the time of release. So I have played my fair share of Rumbleverse, have done my fair share of things within it. So let's see exactly what I think when it comes to this and what he believes killed Rumbleverse. So without any further ado, it's a cool intro.
It's not very often, if ever, a battle royale attempts to highlight melee combat, or in the special case of Rumbleverse, a mixture of melee brawling and good old-fashioned wrestling. Rumbleverse, developed by Iron Galaxy and published by Epic Games, would launch August 11th, 2022, and as the unique aspects might imply, would sort of take the world by a mini-storm, drawing even some of the biggest gaming influencers. But unlike many other BRs, Rumbleverse would have a very short time in the sun, being sunsetted under a year later. Although Rumbleverse had a cult following, it seemed to struggle to catch more mainstream appeal that it needed to succeed. What went
I think a big part of that had to do with the marketing. So for those of you who are unaware, when Rumbleverse came out, even when it was coming out, so the game hadn't even come out yet, but when it was coming out, so many people, myself included, were saying, why is this game not being marketed more? Why is this game not being thrown out there to a wider audience more? Why isn't a bigger deal being made of this game? You only get to release your game once. Why aren't you trying to make the most of it on its first go? And so many people that I would talk to after the game had come out, when they would ask me, oh, what games are you playing? I would tell them, Rumbleverse. And they would always say the same thing. What's that? Haven't heard of that one before. Oh, is that a new one? Every single time I had to explain what this game was, when it came out, what it was about. Because this game just did not get marketed to a level that it deserved. Anytime somebody looked at this game, they always had interest in it because it looked fun, looked engaging, looked interesting. People who would see me play this that didn't know what it was, they would always say, what game is that? And they would ask in a way you just know that they was impressed by what they were seeing because it was different. It looked funny. It looked comical, but all in good ways and just crazy. The kind of game that will, you don't see often. Normally it's, some guy over the shoulder holding an assault rifle, but this wasn't that kind of game. It was so far from that. And yet they didn't find a way to market this game properly, and such a huge opportunity that was missed. And it really is a shame because I think maybe this game's fortunes could have been different if they had a better marketing strategy. Again, I don't know what they were working with behind the scenes, finance wise, or idea wise for marketing, but so many people are just unanimous, both before the game even came out and after its death, that it should have had better marketing.
wrong with the Brawler Grappler BR, and why was Rumbleverse killed so quickly? On this episode of Death of a Game, we cover
Sorry, I just forgot to put the sound up, but should be good for the rest of it now.
yet another BR, a battle royale, but a fairly unique one at that, and an idea, at the very least, that I saw potential in. Pay attention to the clues along the way, detectives, as the timeline unfolds and evidence is collected, all culminating in everyone's favorite final deduction. You know, kind of what we detectives are known for. Get ready to pile driver someone off a building and be the last fighters standing, detectives.
Technically, that's an Izuna drop, but I get you. I get you.
Iron Galaxy was known for some fun minor fighting games like Dive Kick, and although I slighted them by accident in one of my other videos, they were also known for the rather liked arcade fighter Killer Instinct Season 2 and 3, though
I don't have anything against Killer Instinct, and this isn't a diss, but whenever I see Killer Instinct, I just always think it's, unbranded Mortal Kombat. Just Mortal Kombat from the supermarket in the the cheap section. I don't know. It just, again, I'm not saying it's bad or anything, but I just always have seen this franchise as just Mortal Kombat Light, Diet Combat.
mainly Season 3. After failing an Attack on the Titan-like title dubbed Extinction, those successes that I mentioned previously hadn't come in quite a long time. Rumbleverse would be announced December 9th, 2021, and I think it's safe to say that not many people were expecting much from it. According to CEO Adam Boyes in a conversation with co-CEO Chelsea Blasco, she just yelled out, "We should do wrestling," and that was kind of how Rumbleverse was born.
Wrestling.
Rumbleverse was reportedly set to be a free-to-play brawler-focused BR, where you used your fists and grappling attacks instead of guns or magic. You would pick up magazines, which would give you special attacks, or use stat potions, which would make you more powerful. The game, like most battle royales as well, is about being the last man standing, the difference being the gameplay itself. And when you get knocked out of the ring, so to say, there's a countdown timer that counts you out, sort of like wrestling. With the ability to pile driver people off of buildings and poster people in all kinds of funny ways, Rumbleverse was looking quite fun, gameplay-wise. Although the game was originally set to launch February 15th, 2022, it would end up being delayed to later in the year, in the fall. IG would
Yeah, that was a big problem that a lot of people tend to gloss over when it comes to Epic shutting this game down, because Epic gave Iron Galaxy Studio a set amount of time to make this game work by their standards. It was their deal. You have X amount of time, we give you X amount of this, get this game up and running, get it making us money, get it going good. And that was their deal. And Iron Galaxy Studio squandered a whole bunch of time by not finishing their game within the parameters of that deal, that understanding that they had with Epic. So people want to listen. Epic obviously did its fair share within this, but Epic said to them, hey, you have this amount of time to make it work. If you don't make it work, then we get to do what we want. And you can't really blame Epic for Iron Galaxy Studios squandering a whole bunch of that time delaying putting the game out because they couldn't get it up to the standard within the right time period. So that's something that I think you need to lay off of Epic a bit, even if you don't like them. But a lot of people just don't want to give them that leeway because, a big corporation, bad. But, they had their deal on the table with Iron Galaxy Studio. Everyone knew and understood what was, the plan. And the plan wasn't met by one side. And the other side doesn't have to, take that hit for them. And so they chose not to. So when they did end up canceling this game, all of that extra lost time because it wasn't released when it was supposed to, that's not really Epic's fault. That falls on the other side of the table. So, you have to assign blame where it's supposed to be assigned. So again, on that point, that he made there about the timing stuff, that is, unfortunately, I think quite a big part of why Rumbleverse didn't quite make it in the end, because I can't remember exactly how long, but a significant amount of time was essentially lost because they had to continue improving the game before releasing it.
basically say that they needed more time to make the game great, which was understandable. Rumbleverse would hold a cross-platform test following their delay in the summer of 2022. I personally think that the game's best bet was on consoles, with the very small 40-person max lobby count. Allowing for a cross-platform would also...
I think a lot of people have an issue with the 40-person player count for the lobby, but I don't personally see that as a problem. I don't know why 40 people in a battle royale lobby is a bad thing. I don't think every battle royale has to have 200 people, 100 people. I think you can have very good BRs with 30, 40, 50, 60 people. I don't think having 40 is a bad thing at all. I think it makes it feel more focused. I think that means you can have more lobbies out there in the world at once. 40 people in a single player, solo versus solo experience. 40 people is still a lot of people. Sure, it's not 100, but it doesn't mean that 40 just isn't a worthwhile number because it's less. So I don't understand some people's view of that, where they felt like there had to be bigger lobbies. If the lobby is fun, the lobby is fun regardless of the number, you know, reasonably speaking. If you put 20 people in it, then I can start to see where that might become an issue. But 40 players in one lobby for a BR where it's solos, in my opinion, I don't see that being a huge problem at all if the game is actually fun and, you know, manages that number correctly, which it did.
Also greatly help supplement those population numbers, but even then, if the game wasn't popular enough, it could still potentially not be enough. That's a fear of such a game. Needing 40 players versus 4 or 5 for cooperative kinds of things, you get my point. There were some serious concerns looking back at Rumbleverse, how the game was even going to monetize as well, and that stems as far back as pre-launch even. One of the most controversial things about the game thus far, though, was its presentation. And in the age of Fortnite,
Sorry, just to go back on that monetization one. Yeah, that was probably, in my opinion, the single biggest factor deciding the death of Rumbleverse. So I know a lot of people say, oh, why did this game have to go away? It was so good. It was a good game, it was fun, but sometimes that's just not what it is that will decide whether or not a game can make it to a long-standing point or not. Because in this instance, people weren't buying things in Rumbleverse enough to make the company enough money to have it be justified. So let me give you an example. There was this guy I knew. He loved Rumbleverse. It was his favorite game, he would say. He would play it every single day, 7 days a week. He's playing it every day. It's his favorite game, and he cannot get enough of it. He would always be playing Rumbleverse, always be in my streams when I was playing it, always commenting on my videos when I was making videos for it. And other creators as well. He loved the game so much, he went across all different kind of creators just to make sure they all knew how much he liked it. With all of that said, some point after the game had gone away, you know, it had been cancelled, he was talking about it constantly. And I decided to finally ask him. I said, I'm not going to use his name, but I said, just out of curiosity, I know you played this game all the time, and that is not an exaggeration. You really did play this game all the time across a 6-month period. How much money did you spend on this game, just out of curiosity? And he said $10. And I said to him, and you're surprised that the game was cancelled because it wasn't making enough money when you played a game, this game, for 6 months, day in, day out, even enough to claim it was your favorite game ever made, and you only ever spent $10 on it across 6 whole months. Unfortunately, that is the story for most Rumbleverse players. They really loved the game, but they never spent anything or barely anything on it, which could help keep this company afloat across the board. And it was primarily because, you know, this game didn't offer you things worthwhile enough to purchase. The cosmetics weren't really that good to the point where you wanted to spend real money on it. And even then, it was kind of a bump, you know, it was too much money for what they was asking for. It wasn't financially feasible for you to spend the money on some of these outfits that they was trying to get you to buy. And on top of that, again, they didn't really do anything worth buying crossovers. They didn't do anything worthwhile, you know, buying variations of moves. There was nothing really to make you want to buy things in this game because everything was really just gameplay focused for everyone that loved it. And because of that, no money was made, or at least not enough to keep it going, which says it all.
gamers, this was going to be a serious knock. Speaking of Fortnite, its influence on Rumbleverse seems kind of random, but would be impossible not to see or feel when the developers helped port Fortnite to consoles. For example, the visual style, while featuring different models, features very similar colors and aesthetics. Even the cover of the game itself kind of looks more like a Fortnite spin
It does look very Fortnite-y, it does.
off game than anything unique, being compared to a game
Did.
that basically leads the industry and how impressive the engine is, Unreal and all that, was not going to work very well for Rumbleverse though. Still, there's always a chance that they could hit it big as a smaller studio, which would allow them to pump more into the
The thing is, I wouldn't necessarily hold that against the game looking a bit like Fortnite, because I think we've seen a lot of games out there that have come out which have been either decent games or even good games that look completely different from Fortnite. You know, way different art style, way different color palette, and still die. So I don't necessarily think it's a huge factor in this whole Rumbleverse saga. But yeah, it may have had some sort of impact, but I don't think it was any defining impact. The main thing that I heard a lot of people told me this was an ugly game. A lot of people did not like the way this game looked. I thought it looked okay. I didn't think it's the best looking game I've ever seen, you know, art direction wise, but I didn't think it was bad. I didn't like a lot of the character models. I thought there's only maybe like a few decent ones, which was the muscular male and the athletic woman. Like aside from those two, I didn't really like any of the other bodies or like the facial structures. I'd always choose to hide my character's face if possible because they just kind of looked weird. Um, their faces will kind of look like that doll out of Goosebumps. I can't remember the name of it, but it's like a ventriloquist puppet. It just had those really beady eyes, and that's what a lot of these characters have. They just don't look normal. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but it's quite off-putting. But again, not anything that was so detrimental overall to the game, in my opinion. But maybe a lot of other people felt that way because some people won't play a game if they don't like the look of it, which I'm not saying is right or wrong, but it's just the way a lot of people do operate, unfortunately.
The game or make a new, more ambitious one altogether. Part of what also makes Rumbleverse unique is that it was set to only launch on PC through the Epic Games platform. Part of this was because they took a developmental deal.
I know you PC guys hate that. Whenever I hear, Epic store only, oh boy, the pitchforks and molotovs they come out, and you PC guys get real mad about that. I play on console, so it's not really anything I've ever had to worry about or be too concerned with. But yeah, I always do hear that if something isn't coming out on Steam, people are, people are gonna start looting stores over it. Let's put it that way.
Like many others did for funding, but the surprising thing, I guess, is that they didn't use Epic Games as a launch test, then actually launch on Steam like most game devs who took the same deal. Whether this was because of less belief in the product or belief it was better suited on Epic Games as a novelty sort of game is a mystery. They do deserve some nice words though for not taking the easier money approach, I would say so at least. Rumbleverse would launch on all platforms August 11th, 2022, and take the streaming world by a bit of a storm. Rumbleverse wasn't just a unique game that attracted eyes alone, it was a unique game that seemed to push even more unique gameplay when compared to its competitors. Something that does well to heat up and draw fast attention from the runoff of the industry kind of thing. Because the game never launched on Steam, I can't really track its population data much, but I know that Rumbleverse at the start was at least attracting an initial player base, as it had some of the top streamers playing the game such as Lyric and Carnage. Rumbleverse was created.
Let me give you guys a little bit of bonus information as well. A lot of very, very successful streamers had tried Rumbleverse, and the ones that stuck around eventually stopped playing it because they would get relentlessly stream sniped. They could not play and enjoy the game without being feverishly stream sniped. And so many streamers for this game were relentlessly stream sniped. And it wasn't even like a fun, oh hey, I'm coming over to wave at you kind of stream snipe. Hey, here's some materials, big fan. No, this stream snipe was like the F you type of stream sniping where you would load into a game and before you know it, people are on your back, 2 or 3 of them beating the hell out of you live on stream and then coming into your channel and griefing you over it. And that was not just to me, it was to numerous streamers of varying success, not just big ones, big, medium, small. There was a very, very, very concerning and very ruthless stream sniping epidemic, if you will. And it turned a lot of people off. Some gamers, like CD, I can't remember his like full username, but like CD the Third or something like that. Another guy, I can't remember his name, but he's got like long black hair. He played it a whole bunch as well. Northern Lion. A lot of these guys, they stopped playing the game because they were being stream sniped so brutally. And this game's community had a lot of nice people, but it also had a lot of really just questionable, shady, sketchy, mean-spirited stuff. And it turned a lot of creators away from the game. And these successful creators that walked away with their audience, with their people playing the same games as them, to be closer to their streamer, blah, blah, blah. So it lost a lot of attention and a lot of players because some gamers within Rumbleverse were just very, very, very I don't even know what the word is, but just very spiteful people that would always stream snipe them and try to cause as much grief as possible. And that's why a lot of the streamers who initially liked this game a lot eventually vanished because they were being relentlessly hounded whenever they streamed it. And Rumbleverse was aware of it, and several streamers, maybe even more than that, complained to them about it to see if they could do something. And Rumbleverse's response was basically, tough luck, deal with it. Not good.
Creating some fun, memorable moments for players despite being restricted as a game in some ways.
Oh! Let's go! Oh! But don't get cocky.
IGN would give Rumbleverse a total glowing review. If it can get its technical issues under control, and progress is already being made on that front, Rumbleverse's fantastic wrestling-flavored gameplay has everything going for it to become the next big thing in the Battle Royale genre. Once I was in a match slamming bodies, slapping chests, and RKOing dudes from out of nowhere, it quickly became some of the most fun that I had had playing video games in 2022. And it's more than just a spectacle. There are some extremely deep and well thought out mechanics ingrained into its combat design, opening up plenty of possibilities to outplay and outthink your opponent, just like in a smartly designed fighting game. I'm hoping it fleshes out the shop with more worthwhile and over the top items, but if Rumbleverse is this good right out of the gate, I can't wait to see where it goes over the next few years. Now, there's nothing really wrong with liking the game so much, but the issue was that IGN's reviews seemed to be kind of in a vacuum, with many outlets just choosing outright to skip reviewing the game altogether, and others like WCCFTT Tech, I hate this name, but they're a good website, having a quite abysmal review of the game, where they stated that Rumbleverse occasionally delivers the type of bruising highlights that look good on live streams, but it's held back by a lack of content and unbalanced mechanics that actually discourage the brawling that's supposed to be the game's bread and butter. You may want to go a few rounds with Rumbleverse given its non-existent entry fee, but I don't expect it to go to the distance. Unfortunately, most of the crowd was having more of the latter reaction.
I don't know. For me personally, I feel as if the gameplay for Rumbleverse was pretty good. I don't think for the majority the gameplay was the problem. I think it really did come down to marketing, expenditure of its player base, just things that weren't necessarily correlated to what happened in the lobby itself. I think, of course, the gameplay wasn't perfect. There were things that could be fixed. There were things that could be bettered. But I think when it comes down to it, I think the people that played Rumbleverse liked Rumbleverse for how it played for the most part. I believe Rumbleverse's gameplay was at its most fun in season 1, with the way that everything was, set out and how everything worked, barring any exploits or glitches and whatnot. But I think, as the game went on, I think with every patch, I think the game got tinkered more and more into a worse and worse state. That's just my opinion. But obviously, at the same time, we did see the decline of the game bit by bit by bit as the game continued to go further and further in. So I think that also probably shows some correlation that the gameplay was becoming less and less fun as the game got deeper and deeper into the changes that were being made to it. But again, speculation, but for me, it was enough to see that. And even still, despite that, I still think the gameplay was good. The gameplay was fun. You could play it, more or less for hours on end without really getting too tired of it, barring any frustrations you might have had with the game's balance or certain maneuvers. But outside of that, I thought it was really good, gameplay wise. I think it gave you just as much as you needed to get out of it. And I think any more complications to the game would have been too much for a BR, because I think some people forget this isn't a fighting game. This is not Street Fighter on free roam. This is a battle royale, and battle royales aren't supposed to function like 2D fighters where you can do like 10 hit combos. It's not supposed to be that way. And I think if you wanted Rumbleverse to play that way, I think you're just dodging 2D fighters. Maybe you're not good enough to play them, but you want to be. So you wanted Rumbleverse to become one. I don't personally understand why some people wanted this game to lean more into the fighting game side of things when it was a BR first and foremost, and it should be trying to mix those things seamlessly. But outside of that, again, just to like overall summarize it, I think the gameplay was good. I think it was fun. And I don't think the gameplay was really the main thing that pushed people away. I think it was just other things compounding on top of it, such as bad marketing, not able to get money from the game or its, or its systems, and just a gameplay loop that was tinkered into a worse and worse state until at the very end it just wasn't really as fun as it was when people first started playing with how the game started off. That's just my opinion, though.
And not the former. not the glazing reaction. And if they were experiencing the aspects of the former, they were just fleeting, not enough to sustain an audience long term, and not even midterm, seemingly. In a mere 5 months, Rumbleverse would be announced to be shut down in the coming month, which felt like, for fans in and out of the loop of the game, still quite shocking. Usually BRs last a few years, and some of those years are kind of shells of themselves, you have to admit. But Rumbleverse wasn't even able to last a year, which seemed quite shocking. My detective...
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. Rumbleverse's life, which was about 5 or 6 months, lasted less than the length of a football season. Again, Rumbleverse's life lasted less than the length of a football season. That's crazy when you think about it. Like, what? Can't even think of a game that came out recently that didn't even surpass, 6 or 7 months before being cancelled. Of this kind of caliber at least. Very, very strange stuff, You would never... When this game came out on the first day, you would have never guessed that it'd be gone within 6 months.
Intuition tells me it could be them cutting their losses and not thinking that they could overcome their issues they were encountering in the game. Or perhaps Epic Games wasn't impressed enough with their performance. It is a business after all. I wouldn't be surprised if IG comes out with something bigger and better after Rumbleverse, however. The servers for Rumbleverse, the unlikely Wrestling BR, would shut down February 28th, 2023. And in just a jiffy, the game was gone. And people felt like things were just too soon. And I mentioned that one of the reasons...
Yeah, it is pretty surreal. It's pretty strange just to watch gameplay of it, because there was a time in my life where I'd just be playing it all the time. Several days a week, a few hours a time, playing this game. And then, just like that, bang, it was gone. Can't play the game anymore. No way to access it. Just completely out of your life from having been a game you played several times a week. And I think that's why a lot of people are so still hung up on this game. Those of the who have played it, and those who know people who have played it, they kind of never stop talking about it, because it was just so unceremoniously ripped from their hands so abruptly. It's like they still probably can't quite fathom how it was taken from them. Obviously, I've very happily moved on, been playing other games since, but a lot of people, they just cannot let it go, and I don't necessarily blame them because of how it was taken from them, although I do believe they need to move on and get a grip and play some other games. But at the same time, I can understand at least where they're coming from. Like, hey, I really love this game and it's gone now, and I didn't really get that much time with it, but it is what it is.
Being potentially, maybe they just felt like the game's issues were insurmountable, and there's not always something wrong about just packing up your ball and going home. That's because the part that was missing from Rumbleverse was the unique personality that's known and unique in wrestling games, and all of that sort of stuff. It was lacking the good presentation that you expect from stuff like that. Think about it. The game looks like a crappy version of Fortnite and doesn't leverage really any of the wrestling aspects nearly enough.
Crappy version of Fortnite. I think that is a bit brutal. A bit unnecessarily brutal. Again, I didn't mind the graphics too much. Just some of the art direction was a bit weird. Bit off. But I thought it looked nice. Ish. It looked nice enough. Let's put it that way. It looked nice enough. There's never any point where I was thinking, yeah, I think I might drop this game because I don't think it looks nice enough. Like, that was never a thought in my head. Even at times when I was thinking, that doesn't look too great right now. It was never really a big deal. But again, that's just my opinion. Maybe a lot of other people felt different enough to not play it or to drop it.
Presentation is more than just visuals, though. It's the art style as well, the animation, and the packaging of all of it together. And the animations for a brawler-type game are quite amateurish, sorry to say. Fighting game fans are just used to a high standard there. Same thing with the models and the art style.
Yeah, again, back to that fighting game thing. I think people need to remember this isn't a fighting game. This is a battle royale game that has fighting in it. Both like on terms of mechanics, balance, and presentation. I just think people need to remember, this is a BR. If you wanted to play a fighting game, you have those. You have Tekken, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Killer Instinct, King of Fighters, Marvel vs. Capcom. It goes on and on and on. If you wanted to play a fighting game, you have many options. 2D fighters, arena fighters, 3D fighters, you have tons and tons of options to play fighting games. The people that came into Rumbleverse and wanted to turn it into a fighting game, again, I don't know what your intention was, because you came to play a BR. When you would get here and then try to turn it into a fighting game, why would you do that when you have many fighting games? I think that was one of the downfalls of this. I'm not saying like this for a fact, but I think some of the developers, or at least people who made decisions when it came to balance and mechanics, I think some got like kind of just drawn into the fighting game, what you call it, like section of the audience, who they just really wanted it to become a fighting game. The gameplay became a bit more drawn out, a bit more elongated. Combos became more and more commonplace to the point where it almost felt as if you needed to do them to get by. Otherwise, you wouldn't really have a chance, unlike how it used to be at the beginning. And I think that focus on trying to turn a BR into a fighting game didn't really help it in a lot of ways for a lot of people. And I think that's why many people who initially enjoyed the game kind of dropped off towards the end, because it was kind of becoming 2D fighting game light rather than being the BR that it was supposed to be, based around brawling and grappling. But again, that's just my take on it. I don't think the gameplay changes across the seasons did it any favors, as we eventually found out. But I think I think too much reliance on that fighting game identity probably hurt it in the end. Because again, if you wanted to play a fighting game, there are those out there for those people. You wouldn't go into a place that sells, burgers and fries and being like, I think we need some pizzas in here, dude. It's like, sure, I guess you can put them in there, but you start trying to weasel it in and start trying to fit it in, and the place is just going to get diluted overall because your focus is now being stretched around and going into different areas. And all of a sudden, the food quality overall suffers because you're not really focusing on the thing you should have been focusing on in the first place.
In the whole costumes. If you can't sell it to players, then you can't monetize your game.
Exactly that, from what I said earlier as well. The stuff they were selling just wasn't worth buying. And the things that were pretty good, they were priced pretty badly, man. They were asking for quite a bit of money from you, and that can also be a game changer when it comes to people deciding to or not to buy your stuff.
Players can't feel or look epic because their character looks like a Pillsbury Doughboy. Well, it really removes a lot of the epicness of the game, and frankly goes against what's so epic and cool about wrestling and the aesthetic of pro wrestling, which is all about performance and taunts and storylines and more. Pro wrestling is super popular, even in the modern day today. Had they gone more into attracting those kinds of players and that kind of audience, I think that IG would have had far more success. Whether that be leaning more into the WWE aspects, luchador aspects, something, right? But the problem being, in a sense, that when you...
I'm gutted that they never got around to finding a way to implement championship belts. Like WWE titles. Obviously not WWE, but you get it. Wrestling titles. Like, not even as a cosmetic. I never even saw a wrestling championship belt cosmetic even once. I know they were in the game because it was on artwork, but we never got them in the game. At least not to my remembrance, which is a real shame. I thought, having, champion of the week, tag team champions of the week, something like that could have been so cool, like on leaderboards and whatnot. The best players in the game, or, of certain categories, they get to play games with championship belts, make them a bit of a target in the match, say, hey, these guys are the champs. I think something like that could have been really fun, really engaging for people, and, add that extra element of fun and competitivity and longevity to the game. Hey man, I want to be champion one day. Hey man, I want to take out a champion one day. I could have added so many more layers to the game for many people, and it doesn't even sound like something that would take tons of time for them to implement. But I don't know.
Compare Rumbleverse to the WWE gaming series, it pales in comparison to its gameplay options and sheer content that's offered in these games. I mean, it's kind of like absurd. The WWE games and franchise is like one of the silliest games that you can play. Rumbleverse, by comparison, feels more serious and has more of a focus on being a competitive battle royale, and yet also at the same time kind of just looks less serious. It has a conflicting message. So maybe they didn't need to lean into it after the fact because despite being inspired by wrestling, they didn't really make a game for wrestling. And the grappling is fairly minimum, all things considered, especially compared to games like the WWE gaming series. There's just such missed opportunities there with unique finishers and special KO states not even being included in my opinion, which makes fixing the game in some
Yeah, I think a cool idea that they could have done for A, game variety, and B, earning some money for themselves is if you could purchase different ultimate finishing moves. Not moves that are like pay to win, just moves that are basically set up the same way and do the same damage. So the only thing about it would be looking different. So then that way it isn't pay to win and it's just expressing yourself differently. I think instead of everyone having the same, ultimate spinning power bomb in the air, you could have maybe changed it. Hey, pay $2 or $3 and you can get, an ultimate fisherman suplex where you jump up high in the air and you do a fisherman suplex, or ultimate flying brain buster, or some variation of, a Canadian destroyer, some crazy different ultimate finishing move rather than everybody having the same one. Every character of every build did the exact same finishing move. And I think if they offered some, gameplay variations that didn't actually change the way the game played, but it would just look different, I think they could have earned extra money and given the game some extra spice to it. But, they didn't. Again, there was things for these guys to do, but I don't know if it was for a lack of ideas or they just didn't want to do it. But it ended up, biting them back because it's money that they probably could have made, but instead weren't able to.
some ways seem like nearly an impossible affair. While I do think that there is a lot of potential in the gaming world for more wrestling games, including platformers and other styles of the game, I think venturing too far outside of what people are familiar with and expect with a wrestling game is just not going to work in such an established industry that is wrestling that has been around for quite a while. WWE games too are just...
This was a great trailer for the new WWE game. If you haven't seen it before, I'd recommend go checking it out. I don't really care about the game, but the trailer was good.
doing really well at the moment, and they just came out with another one. And then party games like Gang Beasts exist, and more like it, that have tons of grappling and wrestling moments in them. So in a sense, the demand not being there for Rumbleverse could have been due to the player base just being quite used to good games in the industry at the time, and just not being used to something like Rumbleverse, which just didn't offer enough of the wrestling or the gameplay aspects that WWE and wrestling fans would expect. With that music playing, early in this case or not, that means that we have a final deduction to conduct. We have reached the end of the timeline and obtained enough clues. So why did Rumbleverse die? It lacked the presentation package that was needed to really wow its audience.
I'd probably agree with this. Again, I didn't really mind the presentation. I didn't think it was perfect. I wouldn't even say it was great, but I thought it was good enough, and it didn't really deter me from wanting to play the game. But I can also understand on the flip side, I think a lot of people may have been turned off by the presentation of how the game looks, how the characters look, the cosmetic stuff. I think there is definitely a world of people out there who weren't really thrilled with it, and maybe it skewered, their intention to play.
Audience. It was too Fortnite adjacent in some weird ways. It failed.
I don't really know what to make of that one, but I can see it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think that really had too much to do with it. I think a lot of games look like Fortnite and do well, and I also think a lot of games don't look like Fortnite and don't do well, and can also do well. I think it just really comes down to a case-by-case basis, and I don't think that this game's problem was that it looked kind of Fortnite-y. I think that might even given it maybe a little bit of a pep in its step instead at times, because people... Like, there were some games that came out, like, I can't remember what it was called, but that game, Let It Die, they had their own BR come out roughly around about the same time. Deathverse, something like that, or some sort of BR, but it's from those guys. And that game got absolutely zero looking from anybody. And that didn't look anything like Fortnite. So, I don't know too much on how that has to play into it, but I could be wrong there. Again, I'm not 100%.
To generate revenue.
This is 100% the main thing. A lot of people, when they talk about Rumbleverse being dead and why it shouldn't be dead, their first thing is, it was such a good game, bro. It was the best time I ever had. I named my first child after Rumbleverse. That's how much I loved it. Yeah, we get it. Rumbleverse was a good game. It was a fun time. Rumbleverse was the first words your baby ever said. We know. But that wasn't the problem. The gameplay was good, the gameplay was fun, and the loop, you know, was enjoyable overall. Anyway, but it just comes down to the money. That's what a lot of these guys don't get. Maybe even some of you watching, you know, I don't get why it had to die. It had to die because it didn't earn enough money for Iron Galaxy Studio and Epic. That is just like the cold, hard fact of the matter. That's what I think killed it. If the money was good, it would have kept going. Just like anything in this world, if the money's good, things keep happening. And this game just did not give you incentives to purchase more things. Just like that kid I was talking about. You know, he played the game for 6 months, day in, day out. His favorite game of all time. How much money did you spend on it over 6 months? $10. And then you wonder why this game didn't earn enough money. It's because you could have all the fun in the world in this game without spending a damn penny. And that doesn't work for live service games. Especially if the game is free to play. You know, where is that money coming from? Not from enough places. And on top of that, the marketing wasn't good enough. If the marketing was better, maybe you get enough people, maybe, to offset that. But they didn't. So they needed to market better as well. It just wasn't good enough on the marketing front.
The developer was largely successful as a porter of games and not an original IP developer. It lacks content and longevity in its design.
On the last one, yeah, I think it just all comes down to personal preference. I think for a game like that, I think the content was good enough. You know, I never felt as if I didn't have anything to do. I either wanted to play the game or not, and most of the time I wanted to play the game. And any events they did have were, you know, they were interesting. They had a whole new map added on. They had, you know, like a snowball mode. They had, you know, singles and duos, and then every now and then they were throwing trios and quads. Like, there were things happening. But I don't know, maybe not enough for some people's standards.
While in some ways it might seem like I was dismissive of Rumbleverse, I would have liked to see more wrestling or even just grappling games in general, especially in the multiplayer context. I think that there is still a lot to tap into there, but the game itself, no matter how much potential I see in it or the idea itself, did feel quite half-baked, and never quite got the proper time in the oven, or out of it, to complete the cooking analogy.
I will forever miss doing elbow drops like that in Rumbleverse. Definitely one of the most fun things to do in any multiplayer game ever. Just elbow drops off the top of buildings, man. So fun. There are things that you could only do in Rumbleverse, which are among some of the most fun multiplayer moments ever for me. And it's a shame that you lose all of those when Rumbleverse went away.
Stories like this about lesser-known titles can be lost to time, quite easily, especially because this game only lasted for under 6 months. But I saw something interesting enough in Rumbleverse that I wanted to add it to our case studies and tell its story ultimately. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for the video, my friend. And there you have it, guys. Death of a Game. Rumbleverse from Nerd Slayer Studios. Shout out to him. Give that video a like. If you haven't already, go check him out. Go subscribe if you enjoy his content. Very nice guy, very smart guy. So thank you again for the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my commentary and reactions to it. Again, as a player who played a lot of Rumbleverse and has accolades in Rumbleverse, I thought you guys might want to see my take on it. Again, I think the game was good. I don't think the gameplay ever really was the issue with why the game went down. And I think people who missed the game are well within their rights to miss the game, because it was a very fun time. But at the end of the day, the game was not marketed well, the game was not monetized well, and as most of you know, money is king. And if you're not making enough money, your kingdom falls, and Rumbleverse certainly did. So with that in mind, maybe it will come back in the future, who knows. I wouldn't bet on it, but if it ever did come back, would I play it again? Who knows? We'll see. Anyways, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the rest of your day or evening. Take it easy. Have a good one.